And hey everyone, guess what? It's a second episode of this thing that we decided to now call Live Free and Rant because usually it's live free or die. The format is live free or something, but I'm not giving up my freedoms and I'm not giving up my loud mouth either. And I don't think you, my lovely co-host Chris Maidment, I don't think you disagree, do you?
No, I'm not giving up freedoms, and I'm not going to stop ranting. Everybody knows that I love to hear myself talk. So,
Yeah, well, exactly. Now the whole rest of the world can hear that too. And so, in case you didn't realize from the backdrop here from my poor buddy Bob here, he's looking a little sick. I think that it is full flu season, except don't call it a flu. That's terrible. It's full coronavirus season, and I'm got the hatches battered down. There's flames coming outside of the window. I think I see Godzilla stepping on a tree over there. I mean, it's full on apocalypse. How are you liking the end of times, sir?
well, it's interesting, isn't it? I don't think I've never seen anything like this in my life, 31 years, and it gets more and more interesting every day. And the interesting thing to me mostly is the government's reaction to all of this and the effects that the government reaction is having versus what the actual virus is doing.
Yeah. How has it affected you? I've sort of seen just headlines flying around and like this is going on here, whatever. But mostly I've just carried on my life. My life has hardly changed in the slightest. But how's it impacted you?
Personally, not that much. We rescheduled a couple of the kids' doctor's appointments. They were just well visits, checkups, and we said, well, maybe we'll postpone those. We rescheduled those. And even if we hadn't, the doctor's office ended up rescheduling it for everybody else. So, well visits are being put off, physicals are being put off. So the kids didn't go to the doctor this week. They're not going to go. They didn't go last week. They're not going to go this week. But my kids are too young to be in school yet. So that's not a concern. Rachel works from home, not a concern. I'm a contractor, not a concern. So not too much, just living life, moving on.
Yeah, so I've seen so many headlines about what the local governments have been doing as far as, telling people what they can and can't do, i.e. what they do best and worst, unfortunately. What has actually been happening here in New Hampshire? And I hate to say that like I'm kind of ignorant because I've sort of stayed out in a way and just heard people saying, "Oh, I heard there's going to be a press conference," and I've just seen like, you know, New Jersey wants you to relocate to like a 6x10 coffin or something like that for the next 3 months or whatever it is. So what's going on here?
Yeah, so Governor Sununu held a press conference with state epidemiologist Benjamin Chen yesterday and Commissioner of Education Frank Edelblue and the Commissioner of the Department of Health and Human Services, Lori Shibinette, was there also. Basically, New Hampshire has been level-headed and has acted responsibly so far. They're not inciting more panic. They're not going crazy. They're not losing their minds. Very simple steps that they've taken include closing public schools until April 3rd. So for the next 3 weeks, no students will be in public schools. They're encouraging private schools to do the same, but they're not mandating it yet. Charter schools are public schools, so same thing. And then what the Department of Education did is they implemented an emergency rule that says to all of these public school systems that you need to get distance learning programs online by next Monday. So today's the 16th. By next Monday, the 23rd, every public school system in the state has to have a distance learning program. Most of that's going to be online learning, through Chromebooks or laptops or iPads or whatever. The teacher can use certain platforms that are available to provide instruction to the students that would normally be in their class. And for, more rural districts, that can be take-home packets or other forms of instruction. So the thinking is that students will continue to learn even though they're going to be out of school for 3 weeks so that they don't have to make all that up, in June, July, however long the school year would end up going to meet the minimum number of days that they have to be there.
Yeah. So it seems like from a local perspective, this has been pretty much a positive. Like, get people out of those filthy, nasty public schools. Sorry for anyone who enjoyed their experience there. And basically mandate that people have, again, mandates from the government on the government are okay in my book, right? So that they make available more educational freedom.
Yeah, these are government schools, so the government obviously has the right to close them and to make rules around them. So, there's people, not too many people have had a problem with this that I've seen. Everybody seems to be taking this virus very seriously. We know that the school-aged population isn't being affected tremendously. Most cases are mild in people under the age of 50 or 60. It's the elderly population and the immunocompromised population, people with respiratory disease like myself. I have asthma, or people that smoke, or they have other chronic illnesses that keep their immune system down, that suffer the most. So school-age children aren't going to start dropping dead if they were in school, but they could bring it home to their grandparents. They could bring it home to their parents that might not have the immune system to fight the disease off, or the virus. It's a virus. It's not a disease. It's a virus.
Little disease carriers,
Yeah, I mean, my kids are both under the age of 3, but it seems like every time they go somewhere in public, they come home with some new germ and some new bug, and and I get it first. So
of course, yeah, they're trying to do you in. It's kind of funny how that whole thing works, but it seems like so far that's been a very measured sort of response, and hopefully this whole mandating the distance learning become available. Hopefully it sticks, because I mean, I would, if I was a kid, I'd have the virus all the time and be like, oh, it's still 6 months later. Oh, it still got me. Can I still learn from home and not have to go back to that hellhole?
Yeah, I mean, this could be one of the most positive things that comes out of this whole crisis, is a giant paradigm shift in how parents think about education. For a long time, like a really long time, we've been busing children to a centralized location for them to learn from one person in one place. And this can show that we don't need to do that, because we don't.
Yeah, absolutely.
The internet of things, we live in, it's the year 2020, and you can find a curriculum for just about anything online for free. So opening the eyes of parents that are used to sending kids to what amount to government daycare centers, now that they're forced to stay home and they're still going to learn. I mean, let's hope that most kids do continue to learn, because it's not as easy to keep your kid focused on learning when they're at home, because of course there's always a million things they'd rather be doing, like playing video games or anything fun.
Yeah. That's the funny thing about this whole thing, is people have taken education as not only it's something government does, or it's government, or for rich people, something the private institutions do. And it's still a thing that it's a very tangible thing you have to go out and buy in a store, basically. You have to go out, purchase education, and then receive it. And it's a whole, I mean, how much of your life skills, let's just take anything. Let's just combine, what you do for work and include social skills, and how to dress properly, and, how to, run a house, again, assumptions being made here, right? Like how to actually run a house, take care of a household, how to pay bills, how to do, market things, how to write, anything political you've been doing, all that stuff. How much of that did you actually learn in any kind of a formalized education?
For me, almost none.
Yeah, pretty much nothing.
Yeah. I was working with people in the public. My grandfather owned a restaurant. I started working when I was 8. And then I started working with my dad, who does painting. I was working with customers there. And then I worked at Market Basket. And that's where I learned a lot of my social skills, or lack thereof, as some people might say. And a lot of the things that I've learned, I learned math in high school. I learned a little bit of history. I didn't really pay attention to history
of
class.
course.
I won't tell anybody that. Don't tell my teachers. I don't remember their names, but everything else has been real life experience and learning in life. And if I wanted to know about a particular subject, I would find it on the internet, or I would find a class, or I would find somebody that knew it. And most of my learning in my life has happened after high school, and definitely at least 90% of it happened outside of school buildings.
Yeah, it's definitely a giant paradigm shift because, first off, there used to be, knowledge used to be recorded in scarce environments. I.e., you'd have like the Library of Alexandria or whatever, wherever else. You'd have like the tomes of knowledge that certain people had access to, and there would be certain elders, like if you go down to like the tribal elder level, or in more modern civilizations, still then there'd be people who knew what they meant and knew interpretations, and it's like a very limited source of knowledge. So you say, oh well, yeah, I got to go, and this is where we find them. Now we live in a world where that knowledge is everywhere. It's just there's the raw information is accessible to all. It's all over the place. Anyone can watch, anyone can see. You don't even need a teacher teaching online courses in a lot of ways. You just see stuff happening. I think that one thing it's one of those examples of that kind of a you don't need teachers is one of the most dominant UFC fighters in the modern era, Max Holloway, when he was coming up, when he joined the UFC, which is the big leagues of MMA fighting, he didn't have a proper striking coach, like showing him how to put all his combinations together and all this. He was learning stuff from playing the UFC video game. He's in the UFC and he's playing the UFC video game. He's like, oh, that move that this character I like does, I'm going to see if I can replicate it on a bag, and I'm going to throw it out in an actual fight. It's like, first off, that's pretty credible, but that's a different story entirely. But you just can learn from anything, and especially now that there's just knowledge everywhere.
Yeah, and most things you can teach yourself at home, or you can find a tutor if you have questions, or you can find a community that's learning together, and you don't need a formal education setting to learn it. I will say that I would like doctors to practice a little bit before they start, operating on real people.
Yeah, I mean, literally, if I walked in, Da Vinci, he kind of did it old school. He just started grave robbing and then figuring it out, and he's like, I'm a doctor now.
Well, hey, I mean, if you're going to practice on dead bodies, that's one thing because you can't kill them. But if my heart surgeon walks in and says, oh, I've never done a heart surgery before, well, I might be a little concerned. So,
yeah,
there is some, but that's the outlier, right? Because not everybody's a heart surgeon. Not everybody is a rocket scientist. Not everybody, I didn't go to a formal education to learn how to be a carpenter.
Mm-hmm.
I learned on the job from carpenters. I didn't go to a formal education to learn how to be a manager at Market Basket. I learned from managers at Market Basket.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of, teachers go to school to learn how to teach, and then they teach people, but most of them have never actually lived in the real world or worked in the real world, I should say.
Yeah. There's a lot of, that's a funny thing when you have people who get teaching degrees, or they get degrees from a university, and then they get their master's and doctorate or whatever, and then their job is to then like repeat the cycle and teach someone else. And I understand that some things is like literally just study a bunch and then you just pass it on to the next person. There's some validity to that. But a lot of these things is like, well, where's the new stuff coming from? Because some knowledge might be static. Like history of certain time periods is relatively static because it happened. Nothing more is going to happen in the 1800s than has already happened. But you will discover new bits here and there. New research comes around. But on just anything that's not purely academic, like a business school, oh, you teach business and all that. Like, okay, you better have run some pretty successful things. You better still be in the game. You can't just be retired and be like, yeah, I had a startup. It did okay. I sold it to Yahoo for a bunch of money. And then I'm just going to teach business now. And now that I haven't done it in decades, it's like, yeah, it doesn't quite work that well.
Yeah, and then they take, what do they call them? Sabbaticals.
Mm-hmm.
And
The T word, tenure.
Tenure, yeah.
Yeah.
I think everybody learns best through experience. Obviously, there's room for classical education, classical training, and things of that nature. Speaking of which, I just want to plug real quick for the parents at home who now have all of their children out of school and might need some assistance. You can go to granitestatehomeeducators.org. They have some information for those people that are new to homeschooling. They've been doing homeschooling for a long time over there. So granitestatehomeeducators.org if you need some help, and some guidance with your children being home now, and you need some guidance in getting them to learn as if they were still in school.
Yeah, and I'd like to, reiterate that homeschooling is, there's a little bit of a Wild West component to it still because people are still figuring out what works. But ultimately, it's going to work if you figure it out as you go along. Like, it's kind of like the on-the-job training. Now, I was homeschooled all the way up until everything. And
that explains so much.
Yeah, of course. Now, starting with, okay, let's buy some curriculums. Let's go through, basically, let's do public school at home. And I hated that. And it just didn't work out that well. So then it ended up being like, well, what do you guys want to learn? Well, we want to learn these things. And then you got to learn some of this stuff. And then just like reading a lot of books, watching a lot of movies that are, relevant, historically relevant to stuff. Just studying like, hey, you want to learn some French? All right, let's just start doing this and that. And hey, you want to learn how to do this? Hey, my PE, of course, was martial arts. And then you get to, all the way through. Now you get to a point where there's a lot of people that are extremely intimidated by the concept of home education because they're like, I'm not a teacher. I don't know how to do this. And guess what? On the other end of the spectrum, there's unschooling, which I think unschooling can work great if you if you get things right. There's a lot of people that then just say whatever the child wants, which, it's a great idea, but go about it by just saying, all right, no school. And then you just sit and play video games all day, and then that's it. And it's like, well, that's a hard environment to start trying to learn from. And somewhere in the middle of those two extremes of like, let's do the pre-programmed coursework and all this kind of stuff, and just kind of do whatever the hell you want. Somewhere in there's like the mix, and I think that the mix, the perfect solution is very different for each person, which is why, hey, guess what? If you're educated at home, you don't have to do what everyone else is doing. It works for everyone else. But it's generally something that I think this pandemic situation is turning a lot of people onto this concept, and a lot of people will, probably, let's be honest, a lot of people will be driven nuts at the fact that their kids are home all the time now. And they're like, I didn't realize how much I enjoyed that little break. But a lot of people are going to be like, wow, this is way better than dealing with all that nonsense.
Yeah, well, I mean, part of it is, right, we put kids on a school bus for, I don't know, up to 2 hours a day to bus them. And, they get on the bus at 6:30 in the morning. They get off at the bus at 4:30 in the afternoon sometimes. And, a lot of these cases, the kids are gone for as long as the parents are working a full-time job. And it's kind of crazy because, when do they get to be a kid? Because, it's completely structured. It's completely rigid. In most cases, the kids, you sit down in class, the bell rings, you run to the next class, the bell rings, you run to the next class, you have lunch, I don't know if they do recess anymore, if they do that in high school, but you get study hall, whatever the case may be. And it's this completely rigid, structured environment. And now the extreme is they're going from that, where they have to be on the bus at 6:30 in the morning and go through that rigid, structured day. And then they get home at 4:30, they do their homework, they eat dinner, and they go to bed. And now they're home. And I don't know how the structure is going to work out for the kids, but I imagine it's going to be a lot less structured. It's a lot harder to tell a kid that they have to tune into something at 9:15 in the morning and pay attention for 45 minutes if they're at home.
Yeah.
More likely, it's going to be a lot of self-directed, okay, here's your lesson, here's the assignment, here's the, I'll record a lecture and it'll be online, kind of like what we're doing. It'll be a 45-minute video, All right, and then after that, you're going to practice and, submit the assignment online and I'll grade it. And
Mm-hmm.
you can kind of do it at your leisure. So for me, I would do all the math stuff first because I would like math. And then boom, I'm done with math. And now I have to struggle through to get through the English. And it might take me longer or I might not do it. But that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of the pitfalls with the self-directed learning structure is you either sink or you swim, right?
Yeah.
But if you sink, then maybe the teacher and you and your parents are going to learn more from you sinking than if you were just ushered along in a little life jacket in the classroom.
Yeah, that's the thing also about learning is it's a very kind of dynamic structure of you're reading stuff, you're working at this, you take a break, you do whatever else, and then you have barriers you hit, you get over them. However it works out, it's like I would say it's akin to say being completely self-employed to where you don't have a steady paycheck, you don't have steady hours. You just got to go out in there and hustle. And by the way, that's of course the next chapter of this whole thing, but work from home and self-employed, both of those things are something that I think most people are woefully unprepared to do, and it's scary for a lot of people. Or it's woohoo, and then it sucks. But because it's the same thing, like I don't have anywhere to show up. I can't I don't have anywhere to just show up and punch in my time and go and then be provided for. Get some money, and I decide what I do with the money. But still, it's like this is what it is. You have to just sort of go out into the great nothing and just scrounge for resources, kind of like an old school hunter with a spear. Is there anything to stick over here? It's the same sort of thing. And with the education and with being, self-employed, it's the same sort of a thing where you can kind of just do nothing at all, but then you starve to death, either, physically or, in terms of your learning, your education. And so you just have to get off and start making stuff happen and find a solution that works for you. But, I mean, as you said, it hasn't been that much of an adjustment doing the whole work from home thing because you kind of just, all you guys sort of do the same thing already. Do you know anyone who has been kind of taking this hard or taking this like, wow, this is crazy?
Well, not directly. I haven't seen it directly in person. I could speculate based off of social media, but that would be irresponsible. So I know a lot of people that are in a position where their kids are at home now and they still have to work, which is going to pose some difficulties for people, right? So and now we can pivot back into the original discussion we were having, which is about the proper role of government and all this and what the state of New Hampshire is doing. There's emergency rules coming out for unemployment insurance so that parents who are now stuck at home because their kids are not in government daycare can apply for unemployment and it will be available to them. So even though they're technically employed, but they just can't be there because of this government mandate. So now the government, so the unemployment insurance program will pay them to be home with their kids. I'm not sure where the money's going to come from. I assume it's going to come from the general fund at some point, or maybe it'll come from the, yeah. Or maybe it'll come from the statewide education. If we're not paying bus drivers and we're not paying for buses and we're not paying for lights and heat and all of these buildings, because now the kids are home, maybe it'll, be redirected from the education trust fund into the unemployment insurance fund so that the education system is now paying parents to stay home to parent their kids.
Yeah,
so,
or getting a refund rather. So that's a way better way of doing things, and I think plenty of other ways of doing things. Obviously, I'm not a fan of any kind of government bailout, including government insurance and stuff. But if it's like you're taking school money that they're not going to spend on actual school because people aren't in the schools, you're taking that and putting it back in. That does kind of make sense. Although this whole thing with the the idea of employment insurance or unemployment benefits and stuff like that. Um, I wonder what like the free market solution for that is, because I'm sure in some cases, some like very like day labor type people might get, you know, some private unemployment insurance, again, assuming a world where the government has no unemployment service. They might just like, I'll pay like $10 a month in case, you know, I get laid off for long enough and stuff. But for the most part, unemployment insurance is your savings, you know?
Right. Well, that's what I was going to say. The free market solution to this is personal responsibility.
Yeah.
You know, everybody. I mean, it's crazy the amount of people that can't afford like a $500 emergency in this country, which is
most people, a lot of
that
people.
is not that a lot of people that live paycheck to paycheck, and I feel bad for them. But you know, that's not the way. You know, I wasn't very good at this when I was becoming an adult. I spent way more than I should have. I put things on credit cards, and I didn't really have savings accounts. But I figured out when I was unemployed for a little while that, man, you really need to have a little bit of a nest egg. And I don't know if you've ever listened to Dave Ramsey. You know, he suggests a 3 to 6 month emergency fund. You know, so you that way when something like this happens, it's not, oh my God, panic.
Yeah,
we're broke. Now what do? You should have 3 to 6 months savings in the bank for all of your expenses. So you add up your expenses, you multiply by 3 and you multiply by 6, and somewhere in between those two numbers is what you should have in your emergency fund at all times for cases like this. So if for example, the school's closed for 3 weeks and you can't go to work, well, instead of depending on the government to help you out, you're self-sufficient. And, you know, I mean, and that brings us to, you know, like the hoarding that's going on.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you've been to the grocery store in the last week, but it is a madhouse.
Yeah, and you know what's funny about that? The madhouse factor is highly dependent on which grocery store you go to. So, and I don't know what this says about anything. I'll just throw it out there for that. But the Market Baskets and the Walmarts of the world are just like are relatively apocalyptic, especially the grocery store side of things, like the Market Basket, rather than just the general store. Just down the road here, Tender Crop Farms is kind of like a farm turned sort of grocery store, and you go there and it's just business as usual. Like everything is still there. Like people haven't rated things because like their pickings are too high to rate stuff. Although I hear some of the Whole Foods even gotten rated relatively recently. But I think it's hilarious that like the things that people are trying to buy and stock up on. The toilet paper one is of course like the sign of the times, because that's always the last thing in my mind that I'm worried about running out of. It's like, am I gonna have like food and water, of course, water first, right? Like running water or whatever. Food are the big ones, of course. And then after that, the one that's much more of a pressing concern in the short term, but long term, is coffee. If I don't have a supply, if I run out of coffee, I'm going to be really miserable. So, but of course, if I'm like, if it's a starving to death kind of a question, I have no problem giving up coffee. But everything else. But it's funny how people are going to this like, oh, I got to just like buy out like all this random stuff and just like somehow I feel secure. It's more of an action, I think, on a security kind of a feeling, like a security blanket. Like I'm building a security blanket and I'm making it out of 2-ply, you know?
Yeah, I don't know what the toilet paper thing is all about personally, but when I started seeing photos of everybody else flocking to the stores, I started the psychological effect in my head was, do I have enough stuff?
Of course.
Do I need to go to the grocery store? I'm seeing everybody else go to the grocery store, so I must need to go to the grocery store. So we did a little bit of an inventory. As you know, I do my own. I raise my own meat chickens. I raise my own egg chickens. I raise my own pigs. So I knew I was good on meat, but we did an inventory anyway, and it turns out I have enough meat for the next 15 months. which is a good feeling.
Yeah.
And then we went down to the basement and we took a inventory on, non-perishable goods. We did, okay, two dozen boxes of pasta. And I looked at my wife and I said, why do we have 24 boxes of pasta? Not that I was mad. We didn't have to go to the grocery store.
Yeah.
So that was all great. We were out of pasta sauce. We were out of like a couple other things. So we went to the grocery store and we spent like $50. But we didn't need toilet paper. We didn't need any of that stuff. But I said, well, and it's that, I think it's that kind of effect because you've seen that video of the guy dancing on the hill. They showed it at a TED Talk.
Oh yeah, about the one guy, and then the second guy joins in, and before everyone's dancing.
And he says at some point, and if you hurry up, you won't get left out. So it's that kind of a movement where, okay, somebody goes and buys toilet paper and somebody else sees somebody buying 10 packages of toilet paper and they go, maybe I need that much toilet paper. And then they do it. And then somebody else does it. And then before you know it, the entire country is flocking to buy toilet paper because they don't want to get left out. And there's this psychological fear. I don't know if it's subconscious or if it's, people actually think this, where you're like, oh my gosh, everybody's buying the toilet paper. I have to go get some right now before it's too late because I will never be able to get toilet paper ever again.
Yeah, and what we got to realize about that is it's a part of who we are as a species. It's a great survival instinct because if everyone starts running and screaming, you're thinking there's a predator coming. Something's going to get us. Or if everyone starts doing stuff, it's like the wisdom of the masses. You have no way of saying, let me fact check this. No, it's too late, you idiot. Just run. But in a world where we have much more access to information, we have to measure our instincts versus what we can actually know. So first you're like, oh, should I? And then you start looking through your cupboards like, yeah, this, that. Yeah, I think I'm pretty good. I just get these couple things and then there you go. Or you start thinking, hey, toilet roll's crazy. And then you're like, you know what? I'm going to leave it. I think we're going to be okay. I'll get a little bit more. I'm not going to pay anything extra for it. And then I'll just let the wife use most of it, and I'll just schedule around showers, you know what I'm saying? And just so I don't have to use any of it. I'm just gonna improvise and what's the worst that can happen? You just go through a bunch of old socks, However, it ends up working out. You're gonna be okay. You don't actually need toilet paper. Other stuff maybe, but not toilet paper.
So we use a lot of reusable diapers for the kids, and I can assure you, it all washes out. So, face cloths, you dedicate a few face cloths, you dedicate a few old socks, like you said, just run it through the wash with some bleach on hot cycle and you can reuse it. And, they did that for a long time before toilet paper, as we know it now, came around. And there's other things, before all of the modern conveniences came around, we were much more efficient as a society and self-reliant to where if something like this happened, nobody, first of all, they wouldn't know for weeks, right? Because we didn't have the internet where, something happens in China and we know, well, as long as the government of China doesn't hide it, we know about it pretty much a couple hours later if they put it on the internet, right?
Yeah.
And it only takes a little while for something to go viral. So if, this outbreak in China, as soon as it slipped out of China's control, we knew about it here. But by then it was too late. It had already spread.
Yeah. And that's the other thing is mass media and mass interconnectivity really is a fantastic tool for humankind. However, it allows viruses, including the virus of fear, to travel a lot quicker. And I'm actually not super worried that it's going to be used. It's going to increase the size and control of government too much. Even though I am, of course, wearing this, 1984. It's not an instruction manual shirt, which of course I bought with cryptocurrency because that's the way you got to do it. But I think will be used. Of course, I think governments will clamp down, not just in the short term, but then they'll start getting used to these kinds of things. But there's so much more It's not just hey, Jersey's doing awful things, and then people of Jersey suffer. No, the whole world knows about that. And then it's well, me in New Hampshire, just did these small things, and then it's turning out okay. And then there's all that cross communication of stuff. So I think the fear traveling more than it could otherwise is definitely being used as a tool to ratchet up the control over the citizens. But I don't think it's going to ultimately stick despite their best efforts, because there's just too much free flow of information and outrage about, wow, you guys had to do this. Oh, look at this nonsense. Look at these tanks going down our streets. Oh, and not just like shut up and listen, but like now everyone's talking about it, and someone can say that's nonsense and this, this is terrible. This is worse than the actual, like you can just say that and then it can just be all over the place and they can't stop you from saying that. So I guess I'm optimistic, but maybe that's just who I am.
Well, I'm optimistic too, because we are in New Hampshire, and it's the live free or die state. Emphasis on the or, hopefully. We've had a very level-headed response to all of this at our state government level so far, and that's encouraging. We don't have any cases of community transmission, which is really when you get a case or two that was community transmission, meaning you don't know where it originated. They could have picked it up anywhere, hence the community. Those start to get a little bit more worrying, and that's when the government could start looking at things like banning events over, I don't know, pick a number. Massachusetts banned events over 25 people. They closed bars. They closed restaurants. You will be able to do drive-through, takeout, or delivery only. New York did the same thing. Connecticut, New Jersey, they're mandating that like casinos are closed and event halls and so basically the service industry in most states is going to take a shellacking.
Yeah.
Waitresses and bartenders and cooks, short order cooks, these people are going to get shellacked, and as well as the restaurant owners. This could be 4 to 6 weeks of just being sorry.
Of just like having nothing going on during that time. And I mean, that could be potentially fatal to a lot of businesses. However, I do believe that there will be a bounce back to this whole thing, especially when people are like, maybe save money, maybe don't go out, that kind of stuff. And then now it's like, well, we can't. And then there's going to be the opposite thing. Just like people already talking about coronavirus babies, about people being cooped up indoors, and there's a whole generation out of that. Now there might be like the Corona Mardi Gras or whatever, where the whole thing's over and then people do nothing but like they go out 5 times a week or whatever. They're just like out all the time, and there's like a corresponding boom if you're willing to like ride those waves. And ultimately, that is what a free market experience is kind of like owning your own business, being self-employed or whatever. It's not like even across the board. There's some great times and there's some bad times. And if you can let the bad times sink you, and you can not be good during the good times. But ultimately, if you get good at like riding those waves, and of course, a lot of businesses have fixed costs, and a lot of people in the restaurant industry are just gonna have a rough go of it, and there's no way around that. But there might be a few savvy ones that are like, look, we're going to batter down the hatches. We're going to, clean this place entirely. We're going to allow people who are seeking like co-working offices or whatever to use stuff. Again, I don't know what the rules around those kinds of things might be, but there's like a way they could arrange around that. And then as soon as this thing's over, hey, guess what? Corona, ending pandemic special, and then everyone comes back in, and who knows? It'll be interesting to see, and we should definitely learn from it. However, that ends up shaking out.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be 4 to 8 weeks of very interesting times, and then even in the aftermath, it'll be very interesting. Every major event for the next 6 weeks that I know of has been canceled or rescheduled. The Boston Marathon is usually on Patriots Day in April. That's been rescheduled for September, which is a first of my life, I believe. They haven't rescheduled Easter yet, which is good, but
you can't really.
There were.
Just move the calendar dates around,
The NHL has suspended all games. The NBA has suspended all games. All of these I mean, what else do we got? There's other. I'm drawing a blank, but
Yeah.
pretty much everything where people congregate is canceled except for grocery stores. So if you
Yeah.
want to hang out with people, just go over to Market Basket. And oh, you know what? The other interesting thing I was going to bring up
Mm-hmm.
is a purely American problem and a very New Hampshire problem is the amount of people that went to the store this weekend to buy guns and ammunition,
Oh yeah. Yeah,
which is
because
amazing.
honestly, that's like the real toilet paper of the season. Because come on, like, why do you need toilet paper in a crisis? Why do you need more than anything else in your house? But how about stacking up on them gats? You know, like a lot of people are like, things could get ugly, and they don't trust. It's an implicit lack of trust in the government, right? Because if the government takes care of everything, you have nothing to fear. But it's like, well, things could get hairy, and things are getting bad. People might get desperate. I need to be able to protect myself and my family. And how do you do that? Not with phone numbers, not with angry tweets, not with any of that stuff. There's only one real way, and you don't want to be resorting to
Yep.
karate chops. You know, you want to make sure you're effective.
And if the shit ever does really hit the fan, and the police are responding to other emergencies, and you're on your own, you know, I want to be protected with a firearm that I know how to use.
Of course.
And that doesn't mean just, you know, if you don't know how to use one, don't just go buy one. Okay. You know, find somebody that knows how to use them. Find somebody that will show you how to use it. Find somebody that will teach you safety procedures. Don't just go buy one and think that you're all set just because you have one. If you don't know how to use it, you need to practice. You need to be safe. You need to get trained. So find somebody that you know that knows how to use it responsibly and have them show you. And I know that there is a giant community of people out there that will do that.
Of course. A bunch of people who have that as a hobby, and now they get to actually share their hobby with other people. Like, oh, got another one. And I think it's obviously there's that big run on, say, grocery stores and ammo dealers, etc. They're probably making bank right now. And what's going to happen with all that money once this whole thing is over? Maybe they're going to pour it into a few weeks of binge partying at the establishments that were suffering during that time. So there's always those up and downs there. You know, there's always and speaking of like innovation and like finding ways around things, as far as I know, the only major sports league that's still holding events is the UFC. They held one in Brasilia, Brazil last weekend, and I believe they're going to keep on holding them
We can
to
wrap it up.
completely empty stadiums. Right? They're holding these events in places where they have no fans. Right? They have just fighters, their teams, and then some commission officials, and it's all like televised online. So as far as I know, the only thing on ESPN right now, or I don't know about right now, but is the only new thing is MMA. And I don't know if that's going to work out, but it could be this whole new. This could advance, again, crisis and opportunity. This could advance the way sports are held, the way they're broadcast and things like that, and get people out of the traditional rut by just, hey, there's necessity. And now people are like, well, this is what we learned from having to do it zero fans, from only like this. And they might be like, hey, you know what? This is a lot more profitable than we thought because we don't have to we don't have to deal with all the logistics of thousands of people, tens of thousands of people in an arena. They're all watching at home, as like most people are anyway. I mean, I'm sure the live tickets aren't nearly as profitable as all the actual like broadcasting. And so it might be a new era where people get, you start to revolutionize broadcasting because of this whole situation. So as always, the market provides. Amen.
And with that, I am out of time. So I'm going to have to sign off for today.
Yeah, fantastic. Timed it pretty well. If you liked what you were listening to, please make sure to like, share, subscribe. And, of course, I'm putting it on all my video channels, most notably the Desert Links channel on Library, that's LBRY, and on YouTube. I'll put all the links there down below and also put them to the audio-only versions, which Chris is going to be running. And so just make sure you subscribe to all those things. And this is going to be an ongoing thing. So, hey, just because it happened once, it's going to happen twice, doesn't mean it's going to stop. So hope you enjoyed the show and have a great rest of a pandemic.